Recording.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay. So, hey guys. Today's I believe the third LDR discussion, or fourth. Actually, today's another LDR discussion in this semester. Today, I believe you said, or at least Sagar said, you're going to continue on meta reasoning. So, yeah, let's get started. I think so. Basically, what I heard is that meta reasoning is essentially um, thinking about yourself and how you can essentially improve upon that. We as humans tend to always find ways to improve ourselves in order to, advance in society and, do well in life. But like, what if that same like reasoning was applied in on the AI? So essentially here on the ground level, we're just doing it. We're just doing whatever actions we have, or rather the AI is just doing it based on what he perceives on an object level. And then here, when it monitors, yeah, so essentially, this is just like what should I say, like a kind of like picture of like a broad picture of like what meta reasoning can do. And so, let's just get like right to the start. We can do one riddle, essentially. So here it is. So there are three men named 1, 2, and 3, and each one has two colored dots on his forehead. Possible colors are black and red. No color is used more than 4 times. The men can see the colors on the other men's head, but not the ones on their own. A game master asked the men in the order 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, whether they know the colors of the dots. If one says no, he proceeds with the next man. If one says yes, then if one says yes, then all the men win the game. If he is wrong, then all men lose the game. Then the men were not given any time to make up a strategy. As it turns out, the men answered no, 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 yes. What is the color on the head of the man 2? So I want you guys to figure it out and solve it. I'll give you like 5 to 7 minutes about and see what you come up with. I'll like leave the question up here in case you need a reference back. I'll give you guys a couple more minutes. Okay, I think that's good for now. So what did you guys come up with? Anyone? Let's do I have to pick on someone? I guess I'll pick Sagar Saxena.
Fair enough. I guess I didn't get to think it all the way through, but would it'd be reasonable to say that at least the first no, that you don't have 4 of one color on the other two's head or 3 of one color. So because if you did, then I guess you would know what's on your own head. That's at least one of the assumptions that I was making.
That's good. All right. Anyone else? Smith.
So the way I was thinking of it was, since it goes 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2 again. I was like, no matter, depends on like the combination. The first 3, like, let's say pretend like we knew what combination like 1 or 2 had, and then I was just trying to predict, like, after using those colors, like what possible combinations could remain. I don't know. I got black, red, but like I don't know if that's right or that.
Black, red.
Yeah, like I'm not sure, to be honest. This one was kind of confusing.
Well, all right. Chibuka. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think for the way that I was understanding it, after seeing that all 3 of them said no the first round, the first time that they were asked, I assumed that uh, none of them had 2 of the same colored dots, like 2 and 3 wouldn't both have 2 red dots on their head, and like 1 and 3, and as well as 1 and 2, because if any of them had like 2 of the same colored dots on their forehead, then the other one would know what color they had on their forehead. But that's as far as I got.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. So I guess I can show the answer. So the answer is that man 2 must have a red and a black dot on his forehead. So I think Smith said that, so I think he's correct. So according to this, it said I only have the information about the answer pattern and no actual colors. Since the game is symmetric, the colors red and black, the game would have the same answer pattern if we switch colors. This means any reasoning that explains how man 2 has 2 red dots will also work to reason that he has 2 black dots. If any of these 2 would be the solution, I would not be able to conclusively find it. Hence, the solution must be 1 red and 1 black. So essentially, I think Smith was right, because like maybe there's like not really a solution in which the man too can have a like 2 red or 2 black. I believe he would have to have at least a black and a red dot in order to solve this equation, or rather, sorry, riddle. But I think overall you guys like thought really well. So good job. I think, yeah, it was just something to get us started around. So I guess for today, we can go down to a discussion for prompts. So the first prompt is, can meta reasoning coupled with the computational power of AI solve spiritual issues? Does anyone want to start that?
What do you mean by spiritual issues?
I guess in terms of like feelings about yourself, I suppose, like kind of like your mental issues, I suppose. If that answers your question.
Could you give an example of like what like a situation would be for an AI to like handle some like spiritual issue?
Like, for example, feelings of anger and hopelessness. Maybe an AI can like show you something in which like makes you happy, or like a video or some sort. Can an AI can like essentially use meta reasoning to decipher what you're feeling and basically solve your spiritual problem, something like that. Like, for
I
example,
Yeah, I feel like to a certain extent it can, but then there ends up often being a gray area within like how you feel. For example, sometimes you might like scream like out loud, but that could be because of anger or excitement, and that could be hard for like an AI to detect. But for like more like basic, more straightforward paths of like somebody's yelling because they're angry, or like if like somebody was known to like have often anger issues, and you had some sort of AI that was supposed to like help them manage it in like a way in that kind of situation, like in that sense I could see it working. But like in general, I feel like our issues would be like way too complex for it to handle.
yeah, I kind of feel something similar.
Like
In a way,
mhm.
like meta reasoning is defined in like one way in terms of like algorithms and code. In another way, it's determined by like feelings. So, I mean, in a way, a human has like, in terms of like, I guess algorithms, has like infinite amount of algorithms it can use to decipher how he's feeling and how he can improve. An AI can have so much; it can only have so many depending on the space it can carry.
Mm-hmm. So like one thing I could see is if somehow they could read like your brain, because like I know your brain gives off signals depending on like how you feel or whatever, but whether like those signals for like yelling could be differentiated from like excitement yelling or like anger yelling. And then like if AI could like somehow like is able to read like your brain in that way and then do something based off that, I could see that happening. But like I don't know like how like the brain works in that way, like how it fires off like its neurons and all that, depending on how you feel with your emotions.
I mean, I think we I guess to improve, at least try to have meta reasoning with AI improve upon solving spiritual issues. I guess we could have therapists. We could do tests and have the AI look at that, I guess, to see how he or she is like, deciphering how the person's feeling. In a way, this question or prompt is like asking you, can an AI be a therapist if it were to have the meta reasoning and have meta reasoning with it? I think that's what kind of, in a way, yes and no, maybe like basic emotions, but maybe not. Who knows?
Mm. Like if you like train the AI for like a specific person, I feel like then it could cater towards it. But like if it's just like you walk into a therapist's office, like some random guy like opens up the AI or whatever, I don't think it would work that well unless you train it to like behave based off like the specific person you want it to like help.
So going into that, how do you suppose we could train it? I mean, I gave one suggestion. I mean, it wasn't like necessarily specific, but how do you suppose we could? Anyone can answer this. It's just a how do you go? How do you think we can, get the AI to, I guess, solve it if it can at all?
I think like a possible way was what Smith was talking about, like with kind of brain imaging in a way. Because I read something recently where I think it was a cognitive science lab or psychology, and they were using machine learning algorithms to analyze what's it called, images from brain scans or brain imaging scans, and they used that to essentially like predict emotions for the person, and I thought that was interesting. So that's kind of what's happening here, like using AI to essentially like predict or reason about why somebody's feeling a certain way or what they're feeling, I guess.
Oh, speaking of like that path, like with like emotions, like I'm not like too like knowledgeable on it, but like I mean like it comes down to like some specific like a couple of specific emotions you could have and exhibit, and like if they could create like an algorithm to handle each different like kind like of like a person, you could probably like define them into like very like generalized categories, but then like have specific other variables like whether they're religious or not, and something else to like depending on whether if they're religious it goes in one direction, like talking about like how God can help them through it, or if they're not religious it'll help them through by not talking about God, by talking about some other course of action.
There's some pretty interesting points you made. I'm going back to like what Smith said about religion. I guess it is true that people might view the AI as like intrusive. So I guess in a way it would be unreligious to do so. I mean, I guess in a way people solve issues through religion, praying to God, like believing God is the only thing that can save them. Could an AI essentially be that type of God to them? What do you think?
I mean, I guess it depends on the person and how they feel about the AI. Because I know a lot of people would be apprehensive to, like say like call an AI a god that can solve their problems. Um, but I think it could be the case that it definitely helps them. I don't know if they would go as far to call an AI a god, but it could be like a friend or a teacher or a mentor and something like that that helps them in that way.
Okay, so what I believe overall is that in a way, AI could help, I guess, solve the basics of your spiritual issues, but I don't think necessarily it could solve everything. I think maybe with a few improvements, it could get better. But I feel like spiritual issues, they kind of need to be with like a human to do that, because only a human being can improve himself the same way an AI could only improve himself. Like there are so many enhancements, like Watson. He was just like an ordinary, I guess, like calculator at the time. Now he can apparently he learned medicine so quickly. So, Okay. I think we got all we could. Is there anything you guys want to add to this point before I can move on to the next prompt? I'm taking the silence as a no. I think this prompt might have more explanations. So the next prompt is, can meta reasoning in AI help improve our judicial system? So what I believe is actually, I think it can, because in a way, it removes the bias that that may or may not be in certain lawyers, that and like the jury as well, that could also decide whether a person is guilty or not. Essentially, an AI is a generally fair machine. I believe that with the use of meta reasoning, can essentially look at each case that's happened so far before its time and during its time, and like improve itself every day and improve itself to make the cases better, and so that convict the right people with the right amount of evidence. What do you guys think?
I'm kind of curious on how you would actually train that though, since if the point was to get rid of the bias that lawyers have had in the past and juries have had in the past, but you're giving it data based off of cases where you're giving it cases where biased decisions were made, then how would you end up creating a fair system in the first place?
I mean, essentially the whole point of an AI is to improve, to just see how the lawyers do it, to see how a case is done. Like looking at historic trials that happened, like the Nuremberg trials, kind of like, for example, see how the bad people tend to get justice while the good people also get justice as well. Anything, I mean, what would you like to say to that?
I mean, like that makes sense. It's just the fact that maybe on a different note, you could talk about how people who have been tried for crimes they maybe did not commit or tried more severely for crimes, perhaps based on their race or other socioeconomic factors, and like how that would impact the model just because even though it starts off unbiased, it will learn from things where people took biased decisions.
I guess you kind of have a point there, but it also can access it also should be able to access evidence based on the crime, and look at that and see if it is enough. If it has meta reasoning, check if the evidence is enough to convict the felon, if whether or not he's guilty. So I guess in a way, how so like based on like what you said about bias, do you think the AI can improve enough so that it's not necessarily biased and can go unbiased in a case?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can build an AI that's unbiased. It just would mean like I just think it would be the process might be different from just looking at historical cases. Yeah.
Ooh, talking about racial bias, I feel like there's also like an issue with facial recognition systems. There is like a sort of bias with those because like the data sets they use to like, train the models, I guess, only kind of use white people and not like a variety of like skin tones at all. So because of that, sometimes it doesn't pick up on other people.
I feel like I kind of like read somewhere where you talked about that, how like an AI can fail to detect people with darker skin than white skin.
I think it was a TED talk too. Someone was
TED
talking
Talk.
about that. I can try to find it and put the link in the chat.
I feel like I've seen it before. I don't know. I guess you do have a point there. What do you guys think we could do, I guess, to essentially change the racial bias or any bias really in a judicial system with an AI with meta reasoning? Something in the chat. All right. You can put it, you guys can type it in the chat if you want. If you do, you don't have to necessarily speak. Oh, I've seen this. I think so. Yeah. I actually did this for my English 393 class. I just had to do discussion on it.
I think I did that last semester for my academic writing class. I don't know where I found the video, but I found it from somewhere. So I just
Yeah,
thought of that instantly when we talked about this.
yeah. So I guess like racial bias is also something to consider when making an AI as well. You don't want to make the AI fail to detect, like, let's say, darker people as well. At the same time, you don't want it just to simply convict like just not white people. So how exactly do you think they should improve upon it? Like, what steps do they need to take?
Well, so for facial recognition, if I remember from the video correctly, the main issue was the people who worked on it were just like white people only, who like actually worked on developing it and all. And when they did give like pictures to like train the model and like help it get better, they only relied on just using white people to train them. So there needs to be a bit more diversity in people who work on AI programs. So like you can also get their input as well, and then also like
Yeah,
have some more spread with the data sets.
I think that's true as well. Essentially, like, we need all kinds of like faces and people that can, give their take on like what we can do and how we can do it, and get some like, we don't need just simply white. We don't like necessarily, like, if the people working in it are all white, then it may cause some problems, and that it might cause some bias towards the, like, the minority community. So essentially what we need to do is like consider other options, like, can we make the staff that creates the AI more diverse? Do you think there are any other factors that we need to consider when making AIs? And if so, like, what are they? And can you explain why? Um, Hunterman, since you're new here, I guess, do you want to pitch in? I know you just got here, but like, the prompt is like right in front of you. You can type it in the chat as well, or anyone really. Does anyone want to respond to that?
Well, I'm not really sure what meta reasoning is
So I can
because
give
I
you,
just got it.
I can explain to you real quick. Meta reasoning is essentially what humans feel when, like, essentially, like, what reasoning do we need in order to improve ourselves as a whole? Like, what we think about it. Like, do you think an AI can do the same?
I see. I feel like that's a really big step from where we are right now.
It is. So if an AI did have it, what factors would it need to consider other than racial bias?
Like other types of bias, like gender bias, socioeconomic class.
Yeah, so what do you think, like, how is gender bias, like, how can that be, like, how can that also, like, an AI screw that up as well? Anyone? How can it screw up not just racial, but like gender? Like, genders do tend to also be different, discriminated against sometimes.
Kind of like asking, what if you ask an AI system to rule on abortion? Then how would it do that? And what stance would it take? That's maybe a pretty complicated one that might have gender biases as well.
So essentially, in meta reasoning, I believe there's another bias we can also consider. There's also the financial bias. People tend to usually go against people with with like worse financial settings than people with better ones. Like people who can pay a new lawyer tend to also have the better advantage. What's your guys' take on that? And how can an AI help in that regard? Anyone can talk. If you can think about it a little bit, and just as long as you give a response.
Could you repeat the question again?
So how can AI with meta reasoning deal with people with in terms of financial bias?
To be honest, I feel like that's really up to the people who create the AI, because essentially like AI can't really like decipher, or it shouldn't be able to like tell who's a male or female. Like it should just be focused on this is a person one, this is person two, and these are the issues and what should be resolved. So like it's kind of like with facial recognition. I just feel like it's up to the people who create it, and that's where the issue lies for me at least.
So what should the people do about it? You know, what besides
Sure.
hire like other people? Is there anything else we could possibly do?
Um, Besides like keeping like having a diverse group of people working on it, I say just doing test cases and testing those cases with like where racial bias could show up and doing like a lot of them, or gender bias could show up, or where financial bias could show up.
So I guess besides improving it, what are some other things AI can meta reasoning can do besides in the judicial system? What's your guys what do you guys think? Anyone?
Wouldn't AI basically be able to do anything if it could use meta reasoning? Because it's thinking about what it's doing and then improving upon
But
its
like
own
what
actions.
example? Like name an example. Like
Like a specific example. Maybe it could help with like space exploration. The
okay,
way,
well,
because
so like how? Like what can it do in space exploration?
yeah, like considering that space is basically unexplored. Um, hmm, not exactly sure.
I think like most like places like NASA, like they have like supercomputers that have like that gather a bunch of data. But I think like the AI can like help predict like or what spots might be viable to actually go to, or do like help accomplish other tasks like that, doing calculations and stuff.
Yeah, I guess so. It can. I believe it can also help in AI meta reasoning can also help in like online shopping as well. You know, maybe it could improve your taste and make you choose better things. What do you guys think? Anyone else? So I guess besides the judicial system, so I guess we can go back to the judicial system. What sort of faults does the judicial system have, and what can the AI do, or what can the people do to make the AI improve upon the initial faults of the judicial system? Anyone can answer here. Hello? Is anyone there? Can anyone respond to that?
Well, assuming you're able to build such a system, maybe you could also use it to expedite cases, since I know a huge problem is just in the fact that there is a huge backlog of cases, and some people who are looking to get, I guess, justice faster might be able to rely on such a system.
So I guess Armand put here, good-looking people getting lighter sentences. I guess that is a good point. I guess going back to Smith's facial recognition problem, people who do tend to look uglier tend to usually also get put in prisons. Like I did watch a show somewhere, and like this person wasn't as good looking as most people, and apparently the judge took one good look at her and just like put her in an insane asylum after. So I guess an AI, I guess we do need more people to like pitch in so that the facial recognition bias doesn't like ruin the trial for other people. Essentially, we need to improve. Essentially, there are many things that an AI needs to consider, but I believe with meta reasoning, it can improve upon each case that it's done and, do better on the next trial than before. What do you guys think?
I kind of agree. I was just thinking, like, imagine like that the AI actually like had a rating scale of how the person appeared, and then like let's say this person was like a 3 out of 10, and then because of that rating scale, it actually like develops like some sort of bias, and it ends up being harsher on that person. I don't know. That just came into my head randomly.
Yeah, that's a good point. As I've been saying before, there's a ton of things we need to improve upon when the judicial system happens. And I think Chibuka mentioned space travel. I believe AI meta reasoning could help in like which planet to go to and how much oxygen we need to use during the travel, or like, autopilot in a way, going to like Mars or, any other planet really. I guess AI could help in there. So what else do you guys want to talk about? What do you think AI can do? What other things, like with meta reasoning, can AI do in order to help the system, to help the world? Anybody? We got like 15 minutes. We can make something out of it.
I could see it like being used at like stoplights. Those are like and like where you have those signs, the ones that like light up for when you can walk and stuff. So like it could like recognize that like there's no cars on like a certain side of the road for like a while. And then because of that, like it'll switch the lights. So cars waiting on the opposite, like the diagonal side could actually go, or like people could walk instead of like having to wait through the whole cycle.
Okay, I mean, I guess that's a fair point. I mean, there have been talks of like self-driving cars as well, but it's not always the biggest thing. And the traffic lights also isn't important. I mean, what if there's like a power outage? How do you suppose you can do there? I mean, I guess you could just use regular humans, but in a way, I feel like AI can also improve, like, yeah, the traffic lights. I think it can also improve, like, the educational system. You know, it could, I guess, like, have, in a way, robots doing teaching lessons. Like, we've seen in movies how that works. It's not too bad. What's your take? I guess since no one has anything to talk about, um, I don't really have anything else planned for today. So I guess we can do like a chill talk, I suppose, for next 15 minutes. If you guys want to talk about something, and then now's the time, I suppose. I guess since I guess we can call it. I guess we're done for today.